Well, hello, everybody. Happy Sunday to you. How are you? How are you? This is Ms.B, positively Ms.B, coming to you live on A Leader's Voice every Sunday at 1 p.m. But I'm excited. You hear me say that all the time. Today is the debut episode of Kush Shukla's episodes. That's right. He's coming to Storm Talk 365, A Leader's Voice, every third Sunday at 1 p.m. East Coast time. Welcome, Kush.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh man, I'm just grinning like a Cheshire cat. If this is your first time joining me again, I am the CEO of Storm Talk 365 Radio, faith-based podcast network, where we help you talk to the storms in your life. I'm also the CEO of Storm Radio 24/7, where we talk about arts, business, entertainment, and more. Well, Ms. B, how can Kush Shukla help talk to the storms in life? Well, today's topic, among other topics that he has lined up, you will find out that a lot of people have storms that you don't know about, and he is a very well accomplished lawyer. So, Kush, I've interviewed you before. You've been on the show with Brenda Coles, the president of the Richmond chapter of NAM, which is the National Action Network, founder Al Sharpton. So, for those who have not met you before, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Kush Shukla. I'm a senior attorney at the law firm Meirowitz Wasserberg, where we represent individuals in their quest for justice, whether they were wronged by corporate greed or unlawful negligent actions by the police, or really anything that they're looking for justice in.
Absolutely. I put in the intro some of the area that you focus on. Would you tell them a little bit about your practice?
Yeah, sure. I mostly do civil litigation, plaintiff side work. We do personal injury matters, civil rights matters, and we handle sexual abuse cases, which we'll be talking about later today.
Absolutely. Yes, we are. On your previous episode, we talked about a particular case that you are interested in and you want the listeners and viewers to pay close attention to and contact someone. Let's talk about that. Let's go back a little bit.
I appreciate that. So I represent the family of a young man that was unfortunately found hanging from a tree with a root of the tree or vine of the tree tied around his neck. And the police immediately ruled it a suicide. However, the family thinks that there have been some wrongdoings or wrongdoers involved in this young man's death. His name is Israel Monte Jackson. And basically, we've been lobbying the Attorney General of Virginia, asking him to reopen an investigation into Israel's death to see what really happened. And we've been calling the Attorney General almost on a daily basis. We've been writing letters, and I'm expecting a decision soon. So I really want to keep the pressure on and to let the Attorney General know that the community is really interested in looking in having answers in this, and the family, really cares about this as well. So if you could please call Attorney General Mark Herring. I'm going to list his number twice. It's 804-786-2071. That number again is 804-786-2071. And just call. You're going to hear a long message, but at the end of it, it gives you the opportunity to leave a voicemail. And please just leave a voicemail saying you're a concerned citizen and you really care about Israel's life and his life had value and meaning, and you want the family's questions to be answered, because really no investigation whatsoever was done by the local police. They immediately ruled it a suicide, and we really want the family to get their questions answered.
We're going to put that number in the comment section as we move on. But for right now, please take his advice. You don't have to be in the Roanoke area to be interested. This is something that is indicative of other things that have happened in the area, but there are hangings that have been reported in other cities. So we need to make sure that we just don't become a bystander. But that being said, Kush, what are we going to talk about today?
Sexual assault laws and the change in laws across the country, and basically a change in the culture, really, in viewing sexual assault in this country.
I know this is something that you're really interested in, but is there a particular case that made you decide to choose this topic?
Well, I've been working on these types of cases for the past year, And mostly because the country has really changed. With the whole Me Too movement, their stories are being valued more, and people are believing them more and giving them access to justice. So over the last year or two, because of the Me Too movement, there's been changes in laws on a statewide basis where the state has made it much easier for victims to come forward, to tell their story, and to really confront the perpetrators in these matters. And a couple of things that the states have done, for example, in the two states that have really been working a lot of these cases in New York and New Jersey, is that one, they've allowed individuals to come forward on an anonymous basis, so they don't have to put their name on a lawsuit. They can use their initials. They can go by Jane or Jack Doe, whatever they can to really shield themselves from their name being out there, because this is a difficult and traumatic event to talk about. And case filings are public, so anybody can see when somebody files a case. And it might be difficult for a victim of sexual abuse or assault to come forward if they know that their community or their friends now may know about what happened to them, when it's a traumatic event that they're trying to keep to themselves. So that's one of the things that states are doing. They're allowing people that are victims of child abuse, especially people that were victims when they were minors, to come forward on an anonymous basis. And then two, many states have done away with the statute of limitations. So for those that don't know, statute of limitations is basically a time bar that tells people when they can bring a cause of action, a lawsuit, from the date that they were injured, the date they were sexually assaulted. And throughout the history of sexual assault cases in the country, they've treated these cases just like any other type of tort, any type of damage that people have incurred, any type of assault or injury. But I think people have really understood the science and talked to additional people and understood that sexual assault really doesn't manifest itself until much later. People tend to block those episodes out, and they only realize that they were assaulted much later in life. So the statute of limitations of the past prevented them from really bringing a cause of action. If somebody was sexually assaulted when they were a minor as a child, and they only really register and understand it when they're in their 40s or 30s or 50s, in the past, they could not bring a lawsuit. Now, because of the change in statute of limitation laws across the states, the legislatures have really understood that sexual assault is different from a regular assault, that it's an injury that manifests itself much later in time. So states like New York and New Jersey, for example, they've done away with the statute of limitations for a window of time. For example, New York and New Jersey, well, a year ago, they passed a law that said anybody that was a victim of sexual assault can bring a case within the 2 years of this passing, regardless of the statute of limitations. And then after this window period, if you were sexually assaulted, depending on your age or whatever, you can still bring a lawsuit. They've extended the statute of limitations. So those are really two things they've done to make it easier on victims to bring their case forward.
You know, you've said a lot, but one of the things that I want to go back to, why do people wait so late? You know, you've had a lot of people say, well, you wait so late for? I don't believe it, and blah, blah, blah. You know, there's a lot of factors, but one of the things that I've run across is that even though there's something that tells that child this is not right, a lot of adults, one, encourage them not to say anything because they don't want to bring shame to the family, especially if there's a family member involved. Second, the parents are in denial, thinking, I allowed my child to be hurt, so I'm just not going to deal with it, and tell them, don't worry about it. It's okay. It's, you know, that's just their way of showing you that they love you. But the third thing is, like you said, they just block it out. They just go into a whole nother zone. When it's over with, they wake up and like, okay, let me just move on with my life. And they just, you know, like a lot of the people, they just say, it's just a part of my life. Nobody's going to believe me. It is what it is. But that being said, they now have the opportunity to confront and conquer. So let's talk about that before you move into the rest of your show. Some of the things that you have encountered, whether it's male or female, young or old, What are some of the reasons that you have run into that people say why they waited so late?
Well, it's the exact reasons you just stated.
Oh,
Some of them feel shame about what had happened to them, and they blame themselves, even though they were a minor or a child. They blame themselves for what happened. Some of them completely block it out. I think it's somewhat there's so many psychological studies on this, and I think one of the reasons they may block it out is really a survival instinct. It's the only way for them to move forward through their lives and be productive. Otherwise, they'd be thinking about this and it would hurt them. So some of them block it out. And the other thing is, like you mentioned with family members, it's very difficult. So, for example, there was that the sexual assault case involving the gymnast in Michigan
oh
that you
yes.
remember, you might remember. And many of the parents, they spoke to the accuser. They asked them and they said, listen, my child told me this. Is he telling me the truth here? Or is he just, or she, excuse me, is she making something up? And the gynecologist in that case, and the physician, excuse me, would say, oh, well, no, they might have misunderstood my actions for something, but no, it's not the case. And we as human beings, and there's been so many studies on this as well, is that in many of our interactions, we tend to believe people and default to the truth. It's a way for us to really move throughout our day, because if we were always skeptical of somebody else, it would really take up much of our time, and we would have to do our investigation and diligence into everything people say. But as a society, for us to move forward and for there to be interactions and for us to be productive, historically speaking, we default to the truth. But having said that, what's interesting is that when people in the past have complained of sexual assault, in those particular instances, society has not defaulted to the truth. They question them because we think it's abnormal for something like that to have happened. However, I think there is a change in society recently, mostly because of the Me Too movement and people really believing victims and giving them a voice and allowing them to come forward. And I think part of that has really helped victims understand what they're going through, and they've sought help and help mental health, different professions in mental health to really help them go through their lives. And we see a resurgence of people really understanding that what they went through was not normal, and that they should come forward to protect other people from going through what they went through.
Oh man, personally, professionally, medically, even Wikipedia has definitions of sexual assault. Legally, what is the definition or what is considered sexual assault?
Well, anything with a minor, and every state is different, right? So they have different definitions, but basically anything sexual that happens with a minor in every state, like I said, is different. It's usually minors are defined as below the age of 18 is considered sexual assault, because a minor cannot consent to sexual acts. Also, for anybody over 18, it's without consent, and consent is basically a factual issue, and you have to look at the circumstances surrounding the event. And there's also been cases too where they've determined, and I know California, for example, has a law on this, and there was actually a very famous case where a gentleman had met a young lady at a frat party. They both got extremely drunk, and the next day, the young woman went to the hospital because she didn't know what happened, and they had like they did a test for rape, and she found out then and there that she was assaulted by this other man, and they were both way above the limit for alcohol, but California has a law that uh, above a certain limit you cannot consent to sex, and that case was deemed sexual assault, and unfortunately that person in that case only got 6 months for their crime. But so that's another definition of sexual assault. People can be sexually assaulted if they're unable to consent based on their age or based on their incapacity due to alcohol or whatever it may be. Um, Many states distinguish between uh, sexual assault on penetration versus other acts of sex that are still sexual assault, but they're not. There's different levels in terms of severity and punishment. Whereas penetration is the worst act, and that could be punished much greater than other acts that are sexual in nature as well.
Actually, that was my next question. So we've clarified that, and it doesn't matter if it's an object or physical penetration, it's considered a sexual assault. Is that correct?
That's correct. But for example, like New Jersey has penetration is obvious sexual assault, but there are other minor, there are other acts that are deemed sexual assault as well, like groping, touching of genitalia, things of that nature as well.
Okay, so we're talking about the abuse. For people who are in abusive relationships, consensually, husband, wife, living together, you know, whether male, female, whatever, and they're in a situation where they feel threatened if they don't cooperate with the sexual request. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Can a wife, husband, significant other accuse someone that they're in a relationship with sexual assault?
Without a doubt. Every act is judged on consent. So if you went back 20, 30, 40 years, depending on the state, you technically could not sue your significant other for sexual assault or rape because it was deemed that that was impossible in a relationship. That once somebody was married, that it was automatic consent going forward. However, that has completely changed over the last 20 years even, where every act is looked at whether there was consent or not. So even if you're married or if you're in a significant if your relationship with a significant other, it can still be deemed sexual assault or rape if you don't consent to the act itself. And for people in those situations, and for people in all sexual abuse situations, you really have two remedies. You could come see an attorney like me, and as a civil remedy, or you could also, I would call the police and prosecute criminally as well, because I mean these are serious acts that really, people that commit them, they deserve to be punished criminally and civilly for these acts. These are acts that really destroy people's lives going forward.
When we talk about fear, people say false evidence that appears real, but when your life is in turmoil and you don't know how to get out and you're fearful of the person who's attacking you and they constantly, are at you and, physically abusing you. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily mean vaginal or anal penetration. There's a lot of other ways that you could be sexually assaulted. And they're fearful. As a lawyer, is there a word of encouragement that you could give to our listeners and viewers to consider leaving that type of situation, even though they may have some type of fear?
I would tell them that even though they may have fear, there is a better life for them out there. There's no obligation. I mean, I think I mentioned this last time. We're all here on this earth for a very short period of time. Why not be in a situation where you're happy? Why spend every day burdened by fear, by pain? Why not do something that makes you happy? And when you're in that situation and somebody's being abusive to you, you deserve better than that. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to leave that situation and find a better situation for you. If you have children, better situation for your children. You have a very limited time here. I would do your best, find the courage deep down inside of you to really, look for ways to leave that situation and enjoy your life. I know it's difficult, but you can come see an attorney like me. There's plenty of organizations out there that are helping people with domestic violence, or people that are in abusive relationships, or people that were abused when they were a child. One organization that's really helpful is called RAINN, RAINN. And I'm going to give the number out to the listeners as well. It's 1-800-656-HOPE. That number again is 1-800-656-HOPE. And, reach out to these organizations, reach out to your family members, get some people around you, get that support network, and then have a plan to go forward. I think we talked about this last time as well. People have a plan to go vote right now, have a plan to be happy and to leave those terrible situations. You have a limited time here. Do whatever you can to make sure that you're safe, that you're happy, and that you're healthy.
Kush, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about more resources and information on how to get help. Is that okay with you?
It's fine with me. Thank you.
All right. Hey, everybody, it's Ms.B. Thank you so much for joining us. You're in the second half of Kush Shukla's debut episode on The Leader's Voice. You can find him every third Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time right here on Storm Talk 365's fan page. You just saw a little short clip from A Leader's Voice that features Brenda Coles. She comes on every Sunday, the first Sunday of every month. She's the president of the Richmond chapter of NAN, National Action Network, founder Al Sharpton. She talks about everything from voters' rights to the underdogs in the political system. She talks a lot about people who've not been given a fair treatment in the justice system. And she's sharing some cases with Kush, as a matter of fact. So I invite you to join us every Sunday. The first Sunday is Brenda Coles. The second Sunday is Cazelle Levine, a former candidate for the Congress in the state of Virginia. And on the third Sunday, we have Kush Shukla, Esquire. He's a well-known lawyer, civil rights lawyer at that, in New York. And the fourth Sunday, I have just special guests. So thank you so much for following us. Kush, I am really, really serious about asking this question to you. When you come across someone who has been severely sexually assaulted and they desperately are trying to get out of the situation, I know there's only but so much involvement you can have, but where do you send them? What do you do? How do you offer them help for safety and security?
Well, the one organization I just mentioned, I think, is an amazing organization. It's RAINN, RAINN. It stands for Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. And it's really one of the nation's largest anti-sex violence organization. And they have so many different resources available to them. They do victim services, they educate the public, they work on lobbying for public policy, and they have resources across the nation in every single state as well. So they could help people out in finding, somebody to talk to about what they went through, and to really get, different resources as far as mental health, because this is really something that affects you mentally, affects some of my clients mentally, but affects them physically, affects them in their job and their future relationships. So I think that mental health aspect is very important. They have different organizations in each state that could help people out, spiritually, mentally, to get through what they're going through. So I would really recommend this organization, and the number for them is 1-800-656-HOPE. And you can go on their website as well. It's RAINN.org. They're just tremendous. That's where I recommend my clients going to.
Absolutely good information. I'm loving this. But that being said, you said just a little bit about the mental health. The mental health is very important for the survivors, for the family of the survivors. But a lot of people don't understand the mental health also includes those who commit those crimes. Now, you're a civil lawyer. Do you only represent the victims, or do you represent people who have committed the crimes?
I am almost exclusively plaintiff side, so I represent the victims. And one thing that we do is, and I think I didn't mention this earlier, is that we, for example, in some of my child sex abuse cases, we pursue actions against the perpetrator, but many times the perpetrator is hired, or they're basically working on behalf of an organization. So, for example, we have cases where we're suing the perpetrator, but also the organization that hired that perpetrator, because these organizations are also liable. They need to make sure they're screening their employees before they allow them to be around minor children. So, I mean, we pursue both those type of avenues of recourse. But going back to your early point, yes, there is a mental health aspect as well for these perpetrators. And also, even going further than that, I think there's an aspect in corporate America in making sure that these organizations that hire people are doing a better job in their due diligence and making sure that these people do not commit these acts that could be very hurtful towards others. And so I think it's important to make sure everybody is on the hook here, and then also at the same time making sure that everybody's educated about what's right and what's wrong, and making sure these things don't happen going forward.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I am still and was previously involved with Michelle Rhett, Esquire lawyer, right out of the Maryland area. And she has a lot of different organizations. And one of the things that I was involved in was Church at Risk. And she did a podcast on that. And she talked about how the liability also falls on the pastors and the leaders of the church for who they allow to become involved with these children, whether it's daycare or, outreach ministry. And then they want to just, be absolved of all responsibility. I didn't know. And so what you did was you brought up the fact that organizations and the owners, the leaders of these organizations need to be more diligent in choosing who they allow to represent their organization and come in contact with these individuals. We could talk about churches and different things like that, but being that you represent the people who have been harmed, how often are they coming to you with situations that happened within an organization and the organization is not accepting responsibility for the individuals involved? How do you handle that? Are they in denial? Are they cooperative? How do you handle that?
So that happens quite often, actually. There's only really one organization right now that has somewhat admitted that they had an issue, and that's the Boy Scouts of America. They've actually recently filed for bankruptcy, and there's a trust. Part of their bankruptcy plan was a judge required them to set aside monies for victims of sexual assault and create a trust. And there's a whole claim process if somebody was abused while in the Boy Scouts of America. There is a claims process in order to receive compensation for their abuse. Many of the other cases, the companies, they make all sorts of very crafty legal arguments. And one legal term that I want to mention, it's a fancy Latin term called in loco parentis. Basically, it just means in place of the parent. So in order to hold an organization liable for child abuse, for example, you need to state facts, or you need to have a finding that the organization was in the place of the parent at the time of abuse. So they were acting as a parental figure. They were, they were educating, rearing, and teaching these kids. So that's one argument that these organizations will make. They'll say that no, we were not acting as the parent. Therefore, we should not be liable. We're just an independent organization. We had no duty here. They make that argument all the time. And then the other argument that they're making, which is interesting, but it has been struck down by many courts, is that, like I told you in the beginning of the broadcast, many states have enacted these what's called a revival statute, basically saying that the statute of limitations is gone. People that were abused in the 1980s, 1970s can bring a cause of action now. So they make a constitutional law argument, and they say that, this statute was only enacted now. It wasn't enacted back in the 70s or the 80s. Therefore, what the perpetrator did back then was not really illegal, or we could not be found liable for it because it happened such a long time ago, and you're retroactively applying this law to us. However, many courts have ruled against that argument, saying that the need for or the wrong that happened is so great that these statutes can be applied to these people for their acts in the 70s and the 80s and whatnot. So the courts have ruled, as a matter of public policy, these people should be held liable still. But they still make these arguments all the time.
Ain't my fault. I ain't had nothing to do with it. You know, they was just at my camp. I didn't know what was going on. That being said, let's segue into this. The victims of these crimes, money cannot take the place of the pain or the hurt. As you represent them, and sometimes they're compensated financially, different degrees of compensation. Do you find that even though they've brought it to the attention of the courts, they've confronted it, hopefully they've conquered it, do they really find peace?
I mean, it's different on an individual basis. I don't think for a majority of them they ever find 100% peace, but I do think they get a tremendous amount of satisfaction in having some form of justice. And yes, you're 100% right. Money does not equal justice completely, but it is a form of justice. Is the way that that a company can admit that they were wrong. It's the only way a company can really admit they were wrong. You can't send a company to jail. You can send individuals to jail, but it's one of the only ways for a company to admit it's wrong. I think these victims, they get some satisfaction in getting some justice out of this. However, yes, these are terrible, terrible acts, and unfortunately, it really affects a human being's psyche for the rest of their life. And many of my victims, or many of my clients, excuse me, they will experience pain and suffering for the rest of their lives, and they'll have to have to see a psychologist or receive some type of mental health for the rest of their lives. They'll always have this pain, and it'll always affect them. This is something that's absolutely terrible that can happen to a human being. It really, really robs them from much of their dignity. But my hope is that through civil litigation or through even a criminal trial, and having these perpetrators either locked up or paying my clients something, that there is some relief on behalf of my clients. And I think that they get even more relief knowing that them bringing a cause of action could potentially prevent more children from getting hurt. I think that's the motivation among many of these plaintiffs in these causes of action. I know it is a motivation among my clients. They, they've indicated that, they want to make sure that no other child, no other human being experiences the pain that they experienced. And, I think that's very amazing for them.
I know as an individual, you have opinions. As legal counsel, you're limited in what you can say. I'm not asking for advice. I'm not saying anything I'm going to ask you. Your answers will be held in concrete. But based on your experience, how can you suggest some signs to the parents that there may be something going on with their child and they're not talking about it, to help them maybe recognize there's some type of abuse going on?
Well, I think parents understand their children and know when they're happy, when they're sad, and what's going on. I think really parents need to talk to their children, and if they notice something is off, if they come back from summer camp or an outing and they're not the same as they were before, something's off about them, they need to talk to them. And I think there needs to be some level of sex education, even from a young age, where children understand that certain parts of their body should never be touched by others, or that these are private areas, so that they understand that it's wrong for somebody to touch them there. I know, sometimes and some people find that very controversial, that type of education, but I don't think it really is. We're not educating children about sex per se. We're educating them that their bodies are private and meant for themselves. Um, and I think if a parent can educate their children on that and then really talk to them, and if they notice something is off, then make sure that the child knows that it's okay to explain what happened to them and that they did nothing wrong. I think that's important.
I think it's important as well. And we talk about sexual education. Promiscuity is nothing new. Okay, let's just go there, regardless of the age, but it's happening at younger ages. As a young man, and you're still young, can I ask you to consider offering a word of caution to preteens and teens as to their sexual conduct and how it could come back and haunt them as a rape case? For instance, the girl is 13, but you're 18. She looks 18. You have sex. The mom finds out y'all been having sex, and now you're in trouble. As a word of encouragement to preteens and teens, they think it's okay, but legally it's not. Can you offer them a word of caution to be careful of how they allow themselves to become involved sexually?
Yeah, for sure. I think people need to be more cautious and careful with their bodies and with different type of social events. For example, we talked about that one case where in California at that frat house in Stamford, Connecticut, and there was a tremendous amount of drinking involved. And drinking is definitely not an excuse for what had happened. However, it does affect people's ability to understand others. It affects people's ability to understand if somebody else is consenting. If they're not consenting, you can't tell. People are out of it completely. I think, my biggest piece of advice is that people need to be smart about drinking. They need to be smart about putting themselves in circumstances that could be dangerous to themselves. And I think those are my main forms of my main concern is that people need to take those type of caution and that type of steps to really prevent from being in situations where they could be harmed or make a decision that they later regret.
Absolutely. And with teens, adults, and otherwise, you mentioned about that alcohol/substance abuse or involvement or consumption. And I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. They took advantage of me. I was drunk. She knew what I was doing, but I didn't rape her. It's their word against the other person's word. But because of the involvement of the substance, it goes toward the victim. I'm not saying the victim is wrong, lying. I'm not saying that they weren't taken advantage of, but my word of caution to everyone: don't use the substance as an excuse to get out of the abuse. You're still responsible for your behavior. Is that correct?
It's correct, and it's correct legally. Substance is not an excuse for illegal behavior. In fact, it could actually make things even more wrong. Like that case I mentioned, the rule in California is that if you're above a certain limit alcohol-wise, it's automatically considered no consent. So it can make things worse, not just from a point of your decision making, but it's automatically illegal based on the amount of alcohol in your system.
We're right around 20 minutes into an hour. I want to ask you, we talked about different ages, but elder abuse. There is sexual abuse in the elderly population, whether it's among family members, strangers, or in a confined environment such as a nursing home. When it comes to consent, the elderly, is there an age limit where they're considered not able to give consent, or is it about mental capacity? How is sexual elder abuse handled?
There's nothing in the law with regards to age, like how old for elder law. However, there is the same type of rules regarding consent with mental capacity, and that is a factor taken into consideration with consent. So if an elderly person cannot give consent due to their mental capacity, it will be considered rape under the law.
Mm, 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 mm. Well, as a former nurse, I can say, been there, done that, saw a lot, wish I hadn't, and it's sad. It really is sad. So when we talk about sexual abuse at this time, we want to, men, they're sexually abused as well. And people say, I don't see how that can happen. Let's talk about that if you don't mind.
Sure. So I actually have cases where men were sexually abused as children by other men. So it does happen. There's plenty of cases with that. And many of the cases with the Boy Scouts of America involve young men because it's an organization that is geared towards young men joining the organization. And so it's possible. I mean, consent is consent regardless of gender. Um, it's consent is consent in the social setting and also under the law, regardless of gender. There's no distinction in the law on consent.
I'm glad you said that, because there's a lot of things that I've read and been exposed to. Male on male assault among same-sex relationships are sometimes hidden because they're ashamed, not of the relationship, but they're ashamed because of the abuse. Like you said, regardless of the gender, most women will be not the first, they are more likely to report an assault, male on female. But if you can offer a word of encouragement to same gender assaults to come forward and understand that the laws are on their side as well.
Well, to those that are abused, same gender situation, I would offer the same words of encouragement that, you coming forward could really prevent other young men from being abused. And then also, like I mentioned in the very beginning, is that the laws have changed to allow you to come forward on a somewhat anonymous basis. So you can, even if you were abused as a young boy and you're now an adult, you can still come forward in a case, either criminally or civilly, and proceed anonymously. You'll be known in a lawsuit or an action as, by your initials or by Jack Doe or whatever it might be. So you can still come forward and make a difference in other young men's lives, and still maintain, your separation from your identity in this particular lawsuit. It's possible, and I think you'd be doing a tremendous benefit to society by doing so.
We have run around 15 minutes. I'm going to read this comment. Hi, Ms.B. Thank you for the show. I'm here with Brenda Coles. I appreciate the information Kush Shukla is bringing awareness to regards to sexual assault victims. I'll be making calls to the Virginia AG in hopes to help support Kush. My son was shot in the back of the head by his father. She put his name there. I'm not going to call it. You have my support, Kush. And then I think it's in Spanish, because you do speak other languages.
Yeah, I do.
And so there you go. But I want to segue. We have about 15 more minutes left. I want to give you this opportunity to make any comments, either in reference to the topic that you chose today or anything else that you feel you want to share on your first episode of A Leader's Voice.
Well, again, I just want to thank you for having me. I know this topic is a very difficult topic to talk about, but I think it's very important for people to know that these types of cases exist, that our society has these issues or demons to deal with. And I think, people that have been victimized and that have this type of pain can come forward and receive some type of justice in their matter. I'm going to give the number for RAIN again, because I think it's a great organization. They do amazing things, and they've been around for a while, and they're made up of people that really care about survivors. So the number is 1-800-656-HOPE, 1-800-656-HOPE. If you're dealing with some type of pain due to sexual abuse or assault, I would definitely give them a call. If it's a matter in which you need an attorney, you can always call me. I'm going to give my personal cell phone number because I don't mind receiving people's calls if they need to talk to me. And that's 646-961-5859. The number again is 646-961-5859. Obviously, the conversations you have with me are confidential, and I will not release that information to anyone. So you can always call me about this matter or any other matter. Like I said, we handle all types of plaintiff's law issues, whether it be civil rights matters dealing with the police or personal injury matters in general, handle those types of cases. And then the very, very last thing I want to say is, again, please call the Attorney General this week. It'll take a second to call them, and it'll make a huge difference in this matter that I'm working on. I expect a decision later this week from the Attorney General. So I think the more calls we can get every single day, the better. I want to keep applying the pressure. This case means a lot to me because that family means a lot to me. And so that number is 804-786-2071. The number again is 804-786-2071. And you'll be speaking to Attorney General Mark Herring, who I heard he's a great Attorney General. So I'm hoping he makes the right decision in this case. And I think the only way we can receive that is by getting your help and calling them.
Well, I don't want to let you go. But that being said, I just want to say thank you for joining Storm Talk 365, a leader's voice. I want to thank you for talking about this timely topic. I know you're only coming once a month, but I want you to feel free to say, Ms.B, I got something I want to say if you need to come on even more. But you have a lot of support. A lot of people are listening and watching, and I want everybody to understand that he could be doing anything, but he's giving you the opportunity to, I'm not going to say get free advice, but to get some information that you otherwise would not have privilege to. This is not just any talk show. This is about business. And there are other topics that he's going to be bringing once a month. It's not just about sexual. As a matter of fact, you already have your topic for next week. We talked about that. Do you remember what it was? It was either or today. But so what's next month?
Yeah, next month, if you want to, we could talk about more civil rights cases and dealing with police violence and those types of matters.
We have the voting is coming up. Is there anything specific that you're concerned about that people should be voting that would impact something that you're interested in?
Well, I think with voting coming up, I think the most important thing is people go out and vote. One thing that's interesting and it's coming up, it's a very interesting topic, is that there's a lot of voter suppression going on. I mean, it's insane. And I know that I've worked with and I've talked to, I see Victor Pates on the line, so I'm going to give him a shout out. He's been very enthusiastic about preventing that and making sure people have the right to vote. And so I thank him for that. But yeah, that's another topic we could talk about after the election. Hopefully, we'll see what happens after the election. but yeah, the last thing I want to say to people too is just please make sure to go vote. I think it's extremely important. People gave up their lives so you could vote. They really did. Seriously, they gave up their lives. They blood, sweat, and tears so you could vote. So I think you have an obligation to pay respects to them by voting.
I agree. All right, everybody. There you have it. The debut episode of my favorite lawyer, Attorney Kush Shukla, right out there in New York. Please read his bio. I mean, it's just impressive, and he's there for you. And you can tell he's very sincere because he gave out his personal cell phone number, and you can't beat that. But that being said, thank you so much, Kush, for joining us at Storm Talk 365 Radio. This video is available 24 hours a day on our Facebook fan page, Storm Talk 365 Radio. And it's also going to be turned into a podcast on www.stormtalk365radio.com. We are on iTunes, Spotify, many other platforms. But for right now, just look at the video on the page. I thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to you. I don't know what I'm going to have next Sunday. Let's just say the first Sunday of the month, I'll be celebrating my 5th year. That's right, Kush. I'm going to have you back. My 5th year as a podcast network CEO. I'm excited. All right, everybody. Have a blessed day and have a great week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Kush.